Share the screen. Share that jump. Participants. I guess sound. Turn off the waiver. Close that junk. Start that video. All right. Sound good? Sound good. Rock and roll. Let's go ahead and knock out this, and then we'll finish a little bit early so you can do your freaks assignment if you want to, watch a video, things like that. I'll take the freaks assignment up to tomorrow. But yeah, knock that out, get you some good points. It's pretty straightforward, pretty easy. Let me know if you have any questions. I'll be glad to help you out. So today, we're going to talk about this guy right here, the layers of the skin. So start off pretty straightforward. This is the integumentary system. If you ever hear anybody talking about the integumentary system, what they're talking about is the coverings of your skin. The largest organ in the body, which I always thought was kind of a cheat because freaking everywhere, and it's not really, I mean, yeah, sure, it's an organ, but what we do. All right, so let's start off with the two main layers of the skin. You have the epidermis and you have the dermis. If you look at this layer, this guy right here, the blue line is the border between the dermis, which is most of your skin, and the epidermis, which is just this little section right up here at the top. But even though it's the small section, the epidermis actually has more layers and more stuff to talk about. So let's do it. Epidermis is just keratinized, stratified squamous epithelium. Stratified squamous epithelium we talked about the other day. What does stratified mean? Stratified is the opposite of simple. What does stratified mean? More than one layer. And in squamous, flat, squished cells. Okay? And then keratinized just means that it has the protein keratin in it. Keratin is a protein that gives your cells hardness. Now, hardness is always something that most of my sophomore classes giggle at, but you guys are seniors, so I don't have to worry about that. What is hardness? Not just demonstration. What is hardness? What does it mean if something is hard? Go ahead.
Not hard. If it's hard, it's not soft.
If it's hard, it's not soft. That's an excellent, beautiful definition that uses the word in the definition, so you're cheating. Hardness is the inability to be scratched.
I was going to say that.
Hardness is the inability to be scratched. If you remember back to earth science class, you remember the Mohs scale, M-O-H-S scale for rocks is a way to test hardness, and you do it by scratching one rock or another rock. If you can't scratch it, then it goes beyond that on the Mohs scale. Diamond is the hardest thing on the Mohs scale. Talc is the softest thing on the Mohs scale. Skin is relatively hard because, yes, you can scratch it, but you're not getting through the skin unless you really, really scratch for a long period of time. That hardness protects us from getting down through the layers of skin, okay? So we have 4 different cells that make up your epidermis of your skin. You have keratinocytes, which is the most common layer, or the most common cells in your skin. They're the ones that produce keratin. They're the ones that give you this hardness and give you this protection and give you that toughness so that things can't get through your skin. You have melanocytes. Melanocytes produce melanin, provide your skin with color. All of the different shades of human comes from a few different pigments that we're going to talk about, but the major one is melanin. Melanin has a dark color to it. The more melanin you have, the darker your skin. What is the evolutionary reason there? What is the evolutionary reason for production of melanin? Yeah, it's all about protection from the sun. If your ancestors lived in an area with more direct sunlight and spent more time outside, odds are you're going to produce more melanin and have a darker skin. If your ancestors lived in more polar regions of the world, away from the equator, or spent a lot of time in caves, then you have lighter skin, less melanin. We freaking changed the whole world, and still to this day, off of differences in skin tone when all it is an evolutionary adaptation to the soul, to the sun's light. Okay, so freaking holy mackerel. All right, but there you go. All right, so we have melanocytes produce melanin that gives you your color. Then you have Langerhans cells. Langerhans cells are actually just big macrophages. Macrophages are just complicated immune cells. They're going to be wandering around the epidermis, and anything that doesn't have a marker that matches your genetic code, they engulf and destroy. Macrophages, macro means big, phage means to engulf and destroy. So Langerhans cells, that first immune system line of defense. Then you have your Merkel cells. I didn't let Brandon talk about Merkel cells too much in his special synthesis presentation last week because I wanted to share it with you today. But these tiny little guys, these tiny little yellow dots in the lower part of the epidermis are your Merkel cells. They give you sensory nerve endings. It's that first very, very, very light touch. Most of your senses, most of your touch is actually in your dermis, not in your epidermis, but you do have this little bit of epidermis sensation that you feel from these Merkel cells, okay? So next up is the layers of the epidermis. You have multiple layers of the epidermis because the epidermis is going to change from the bottom to the top. The bottom of the epidermis is the stratum basal. You can see that because it kind of looks like basement or base, the stratum basal. And at the stratum basal, this is where cells are going to split. This is the site of mitosis. This is the asexual reproduction that's constantly happening on your skin, constantly replacing skin cells as the top of your skin cells are constantly dying and being sloughed off. You ever heard the thing about, most dust in houses is actually skin cells? There's truth to that because you're constantly losing your skin throughout the day and it goes somewhere and there you go, it settles on the ground as dust and things like that. You're constantly replacing those cells because at the base of your epidermis, you are splitting cells as fast as they can split, the stratum basal, site of mitosis. Next up, you have the stratum spinosum. Stratum spinosum is called spinosum, I believe, because you get this like spiny or the curvy little area above the stratum basal where you're going to have your melanocytes and your Langerhans cells. Then you go to stratum granulosum. Stratum granulosum is where cells start to actually look like skin cells. They flatten out, they start piling up on one another. Stratum granulosum, you transition to that squamous outer layer. Then the next layer is only found on 2 parts of your body. Palms of your hand, 4 parts, depending on how you count. The palms of your hand and the soles of your feet. You have the stratum lucidum. And the root word there in lucidum, lucid. Lucid means clear. Lucid means it's the opposite of opaque. Opaque you can't see through, lucid you can see through. So it's that clear layer that's on your hands and on your feet, gives that thickness to the skin and provides an extra layer of toughness and an extra layer of hardness to your skin. You can actually see evidence of the stratum lucidum, like when you get calluses on your hands or on your feet, you have that kind of clear look, kind of yellowish clear look to your hands or your feet. That's that stratum lucidum thickening up or even breaking down depending on what it looks like. And then the top layer is the stratum, excuse me. All right, went away. Okay, I'm gonna have a sneeze there. I held it back. Top layer is the stratum corneum. Stratum corneum is the thick layer of dead keratinocytes. We call them dead because they're no longer growing. They're no longer growing. They're no longer reproducing. You don't have to send blood to them. They are literal dead cells. When you touch the outer layer of your skin, you are touching dead cells because those guys are what's being sloughed off. They're not growing. They're not reproducing. They're not changing. They are dead from a biology definition. And that's the stratum corneum, that hard outside layer due to the excess of keratin. So we got a picture here that shows us this. Start at the bottom with the stratum granulosa, or excuse me, stratum basal, where the guys are going to be asexual reproduction, splitting like crazy. Then you have the stratum spinosum. Then you have the stratum granulosum, where they really start to flatten out and look like skin. Stratum lucidum is that clear, tough layer. And then the stratum corneum is that dead outer layer where the cells get kind of sloughed off. This is why your skin changes color if you get scratched. Because what you're doing, if you get really, like a really deep scratch, is you're getting down to a different layer of the epidermis. And so it looks different than other layers of your skin because you're seeing a different type of cells.
So what about the people that have that can skin right or skin scratch? Like when you scratch.
Like dermatographia, I believe is what it's called.
Yes.
Mr. Sleepy can do that. He's like, you put things. What you're seeing is just a immune reaction. It's a blood reaction to what's happening there. Anybody can do it. It just doesn't stay. And so it's just a different in the reaction to what's happening on your skin. You can go into more detail on that, but that's a super short answer. All right, the dermis, and we'll do dermis and skin color, and then we'll stop for today. The dermis, not as much to say about it because the dermis is way more about what's inside the dermis than the actual material of the dermis. We already talked about it the past couple days in the dermis. It is this strong, flexible connective tissue. 80% of the substance of the dermis is made up of dense, irregular connective tissue. Remember what that means is the fibers go in all directions. Fibers go in all directions, so you can pull skin in pretty much any direction and it without ripping it off of your body because of that dense, irregular connective tissue. Then we have our skin color. 3 pigments that make up your skin color. Melanin, we already talked about. Melanocytes give you the dark color, give you the brown or tan color, depending on the shade of how much melanin you have. Then you have hemoglobin. What is hemoglobin?
The stuff in blood.
The stuff in blood. What color is hemoglobin giving our skin?
Red.
Red. So if you have someone who has albinism and lacks melanin, their skin really isn't white. Their skin is pink. Or even like a red tint to it because it's that hemoglobin coming through. That hemoglobin that's giving us that extra tint of our skin. And then finally, the other pigment is keratin. Keratin gives you kind of an orangish red tint as well. And so that's why you get the different shades. That's why you can have people of different ethnic groups that have similar amounts of melanin, the same darkness to their skin, but they can have different shades of skin because they have different amounts of keratin. Okay. Looking at other things about color, freckles and moles are just a genetic, either a genetic or environmental accumulation of melanin, or more melanin in that spot than anywhere else. It's just you happen to have more melanocytes there. It's just a genetic trick. If it's a freckle, it's flat. If it's a mole, it's raised. We'll talk about skin cancer tomorrow. Pretty much what you're looking at with skin cancer is a spot that's changing. Okay, if you had a freckle and it's been there all your life, and maybe it grows very, very slowly as you get older, or it gets, darker in the summertime. Why do freckles get darker in the summertime? You get more UV rays, and so your body does what? It responds to more UV rays. It gets darker because you produce more melanin in response to the sun. So you have 2 ways that you produce melanin. You have your genetic component of how many melanocytes you have. Then you have your environmental component of how much sun are you getting, how much are you cranking up your melanocytes, how much are they producing, okay? And some of us have more ability to change our skin color than others because of our genetic component. Looking at some other colors, cyanosis is where you have blue skin due to lack of oxygen. In an adult, where would you see cyanosis first? More specific. Nah, nose maybe, but probably not. There's 2 spots you're going to see cyanosis first, and it's spots that you can see past the stratum lucidum and stratum corneum because there's not as much stratum corneum there than other places on the body. Stratum lucidum is here, so there's no, that it would be tough here, but you're close. Face is close and this is close for your two spots. Go ahead. Not your fingers. You're pointing to the right spot, but you're not saying it.
Your tips.
Underneath your nails. Underneath your nails in your nail beds. What color are your nail beds? Red or pink? So if you had cyanosis, if you had lack of oxygen, instead of being red or pink, what color would they be? They would be blue. And then the other spot that you'll see it pretty fast, if you're not noticing on the face, is where? What is red or pink on your face?
Ears.
What is red or pink on your face?
Oh.
Exactly. Okay, your lips turn blue. Your lips turn blue and your nail beds turn blue before other parts of your body turn blue. Okay, we're going to watch a movie when we get to the cardiac system about tetralogy of Fallot. You going to impress me?
I've heard of that. It's like a heart condition that has like 4 different heart pathologies in it. One.
Give me the common name. Good job. Blue baby. Blue baby syndrome. Blue baby syndrome happens where babies' hearts don't change to adult form, and so you don't have oxygen delivery appropriately, and you end up with a baby that is blue, cyanotic. Okay, ma'am? Okay, so here's the deal. When babies are born, all babies are given an APGAR score. APGAR score, you can look up the numbers, but it's a scale from 0 to 10. And there's like 3 points for this, 3 points for this, 3 points for this, and so on. Of all the babies I've ever seen their APGAR score on, I've never seen a 10 because everybody gets a point less than normal for color because every baby is born a little bit blue. Now, most babies, after about 1 or 2 good breaths of actual air rather than amniotic fluid, or their heart is going to flip over, their foramen valve is going to smash shut, and they're going to start pumping blood around their body, and they're going to go from blue to pink pretty quick. Okay? Some babies that doesn't work out, and you end up being blue for longer, and then you might have a problem. Okay? All right. So you have an APGAR score. I think you have an APGAR score at birth, and then you have a 1-hour APGAR score and a 24-hour APGAR score. But I can't remember. It's been a long freaking time. All right. So cyanosis, blue skin, and your lack of oxygen. Jaundice. That's another thing we're talking about with babies. Yellow skin, 2 times you see jaundice. You'll see jaundice as babies because the liver isn't, not that it's failing, but it just doesn't have as much practice. And you need to activate that vitamin D. What do we need to do to activate vitamin D? Get out in the sun. Where are babies born? Inside in the hospital. And so a lot of babies in modern times end up with this jaundice situation that they didn't have 100 years ago because baby was born outside. You'd be like Lion King and have a baby up in the air and be rocking and rolling. But now babies are born inside, and so they have to do all these things. They put babies in a little baby tanning bed pretty much and wrap it sometimes in a blanket that has UV light on it sometimes to help them out of that jaundice. What's the other time you see jaundice?
Raging alcoholic.
Exactly. People who are alcoholics destroy their liver, and so you end up with yellow sclera of the eyes and yellow skin due to buildup of bilirubin in the body that your liver should take care of, but isn't being taken care of because your liver's failing. Okay? The other thing is erythema. Erythema is just another way to say red skin, not the former Washington football team, but the red skin. Why would your skin be red?
Blood.
It's getting lots of blood. Okay? So blood rushing to your skin. Why might that happen?
Pressure.
Maybe some pressure. Injury is probably the biggest one. Injury or infection. Injury or infection is probably the biggest thing. You can also see it with things like mood, like embarrassment, or your blood you become flushed. You can see it from taking too much niacin, which is a vitamin. You get niacin flush where people turn red. Drinking 5-hour energies has niacin in it, turn red from that. And then the opposite of turning red would be pallor, turning white. When might that happen? Why? Say, okay, let me rephrase. You said shock. If you didn't hear it on the recording, you said shock. There's two different things. There's anatomy class shock, and there is Halloween shock. Which do you mean?
I'm talking like shock from like a really like traumatic event that happened.
So you mean Halloween shock? Okay, you with me?
Yes.
So being scared. Okay, so I agree, but both, what's weird is that those are two different uses of the word shock, but they can both cause power. So explain to me why being scared would cause power. I mean, we all know it. You look white. You must have just seen a ghost.
Right.
Okay, we've all heard that before. So what would be the evolutionary reason behind that?
It'll make the predator think you're dead.
That's a good thought. That's a good thought. That's not really what's happening. What's happening is it's your body with that fight or flight. Okay, and one of the things we talked about with skin, maybe not yet. I don't think we've said it yet. But one of the things we're about to say is your skin can hold up to 5 liters of your blood. Your skin acts as a blood reservoir. Blood is just hanging out in your skin. And if sometimes you need some extra blood. And so if I see a ghost, my body's going to say, hey, it might be time to run. I'm going to send blood where? To my feet, to my muscles, okay? Away from my skin. And so you get that pale look because all the blood's rushing to your essential parts of your body, your heart, your muscles, not ready to roll. That's where you get that power from. Now, the other form of shock, anybody know what is, if someone has shock, they're presented to the emergency room with shock, what's happening to them?
They're like really cold.
No. Yeah, that's another use for that word, but that's not the anatomy class pathology term for shock. It has to do with super low blood pressure. Shock means blood loss. Okay, prior to the advent of, what do you call it when you give blood? Transfusions. Prior to the advent of transfusions, which was really only about 100 years ago, 19 teens is when we really figured out transfusions. One of the most common ways for people to die with injury was shock. They would injure themselves, they would bleed out, they didn't have the idea to give them more blood, and so their blood pressure dropped so low, they died of shock. Shock's what you call that, when your blood pressure is too low to function. Now, obviously, we've been transfusing now, so you don't get as much of that anymore. You still have other forms of shock, like septic shock, or like the shock you're talking about with cold, that is your body in a state of shock due to bacteria or cold or other things. But the main reason, if you just say shock, you're talking about low blood pressure. Why would that make you pale?
Because there's not enough blood.
It's straightforward. Instead of the blood going somewhere, the blood's literally leaving. So that's why you turn white. All right, guys, tomorrow we'll talk about skin appendages. Jump on your Freaks assignment if you haven't already turned it in, and enjoy the rest of your Thursday.
So the stratum lucidum